Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a world without thermostats, without hot showers, without even proper socks. Imagine this. It's pitch dark outside, the kind of dark that swallows everything. No headlights, no street lamps, just the flicker of a dying hearth. You're under a scratchy wool blanket, sharing space with siblings, maybe even the family. Go tanned. Your first alarm of the day is a rooster with boundary issues. You're tired, your back stiff from sleeping on packed earth and straw. But guess what? You're already late. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where are you listening from, and what time is it right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice isn't light, it's sound. A soft shuffle, maybe the faint rustle of geese beyond the wall. Someone clears their throat in the darkness. You're not alone. You're never alone. The roof creaks above you as sunlight begins to warm the timbers, and cold morning air pricks your cheeks. There's no snooze button here, no 7-minute reprieve, just the rising day and your body groaning like an old wooden cart. You shift under the coarse blanket. Straw pokes your shoulder through the linen sheet that's seen better centuries. Someone's foot is draped over your ankle. It might be your brother, or your cousin, or a visiting tinker who needed a place to crash. You stretch, scratch a flea bit, let's be honest. More than one end. Try to remember what you were dreaming about. Something wet, maybe wolves. You're groggy, of course. Who wouldn't be after spending the previous day hauling buckets, chopping turnips, and threshing grain with a tool that looked like a torture device? Your breath fogs slightly in the cold. It's not even winter yet, just a regular chill. Your bones protest as you sit up, pushing aside the woven mat that passes for bedding. You're in the only room of your home, maybe one of two, if your family's doing all right. The floor is packed to earth, the ceiling is low, and your head grazes a beam as you shift. You blink hard. It's dim, but you can make out the shapes of your family around you. A bundle of siblings huddled near the hearth, a parent stirring quietly, and somewhere in the gloom, the unmistakable cluck of a chicken that apparently had a rough night. The smell hits you next. It's not bad, per se, just strong. A pungent mix of sour mash, human breath, damp wool, and something faintly smoky. The hearth fire must have burned low in the night. If you were lucky, a parent or servant tossed on a log. If not, you'll have to coax it back with whatever fuel you've got. Wood's expensive, peat burns longer, but when all else fails, there's dried dung. Warmth, in medieval logic, trumped dignity. You rub your eyes and try to will your legs into movement. Your back reminds you you're 30, but in medieval terms, that's more like hitting 50. Arthritis by apprenticeship. You've got a long list of things to do, starting with waking up properly. And here's the thing, sleep wasn't sacred. It was shared, broken, practical. If you got 4 solid hours before your neighbor's baby started crying, or someone stepped on your hand trying to find the bucket in the dark, you called that a good night. Beds, at least in the romantic sense, were for nobles. For you, a nest of rushes, maybe a raised wooden frame, if your uncle had carpentry skills, and always a Lois shed. Entire families bundled together under a single blanket. Sometimes strangers to travelers weren't offered guest rooms. They were offered a corner of the bed. And yes, that was normal. It was hospitality. It was warmth. It was new. Nothing like dozing off to the scent of wet boots and a story about how the bridge collapsed 2 towns over. Historians still argue whether bed sharing built intimacy or bred resentment. Some say it forged bonds. Others claim it just made for a lot of awkward elbows and passive-aggressive snoring. Either way, nobody was alone. You reach for your clothes, which are exactly where you left them because you never took them off. Laundry was a full-day ordeal involving river rocks, lye, and long prayers to Saint Hannah, the washerwoman's patron saint. You wore your outfit for days, sometimes weeks, and changing it, that was for church, funerals, or if you somehow spilled stew on your breeches in a particularly impressive way. You pull on your tunic, coarse wool that itches in the exact same places every morning, underneath a rumpled linen shift. No underwear unless you're noble or neurotically clean. You lace up your boots, which are more whole than leather at this point, and shuffle over to the wash basin. There's no soap, just cold water, maybe with a few floating flecks of yesterday's grime. You splash your face, It shocks you awake. It always does. The dirt never really goes away, but the ritual counts for something. You grab a crust of yesterday's bread and scrape off a bit of mold. It's still edible mostly. You dip it in watered ale to soften it. Yes, ale. Everyone drinks it, kids too. Not because medieval parents were wild, but because water could kill you. Streams carried more diseases than a modern airport, so bear weak, but boiled was the safe choice. If you want hydration without hallucinations, you go for small fire with just enough buzz to make the day seem slightly less gray. You chew in silence, watching the fire spit and hiss as someone stirs it to life. The smoke curls upward and leaks out through a hole in the roof, or not. Either way, your eyes water, but the warmth seeps in. Someone opens the wooden door, and the morning spills in. Pale light, a burst of cold air, and voices. Neighbors calling, animals bleating, footsteps crunching on frost. It's not a rush, it's just the rhythm. You haul the water. You feed the goats. You start again, because no matter how cold the night was, no matter how many feet were on your ankle, or how loudly Uncle Bart snored, you woke up. And now, you work. You shuffle toward the hearth, where the morning fire has finally caught. The warmth is meager, flickering against the stone with a faint hiss. Still, it's a comfort, like the first sip of weak ale, or the scratch of wool that's familiar enough to feel like home. Someone's already bent over a pot, stirring whatever counts as breakfast. Barley porridge, maybe, or leftover stew, reanimated from the night before. Either way, it's hot, and hot as everything on a morning like this. You sit on a stool that rocks slightly on the packed earth floor. Your knees crack as you lower yourself. The stool isn't yours, it's the family's. Like everything else, privacy is a foreign concept here. You can see every expression, smell every movement, hear every sigh. Even the chickens seem to listen in. Someone passes you a bowl, wooden hand-carved, stained from years of use. You grip it with both hands and let the steam fog your face. You eat in silence, not because no one's talking, but because your mouth is full, and you've learned not to waste even a lukewarm breakfast. Besides, the day ahead won't leave you time to savor anything. Your breath still clouds the air. It's late autumn now, that in-between season where the chill digs deep, but the real cold hasn't yet come down from the mountains. The wind has bite, but it doesn't draw blood. Not yet. Give it a few more weeks. Cold changes everything. It isn't just discomfort, it's danger, especially at night. The kind of cold that makes the inside of your nose sting and turns breath into ice on the blanket. You remember winters when water froze solid in the basin and someone had to break the ice with a stick before washing. You remember nights spent huddled together so tightly that you couldn't move your arms. You remember waking to find a chicken half frozen on the floor. To survive winter, you prepare in autumn. The chores are endless, but they all point to one goal: not dying of exposure. You help your family patch the roof with reeds and clay. You seal the gaps in the walls with straw and dung. You stack firewood, precious stuff, more valuable than coin if the snows get deep. You help slaughter the pig, and nothing is wasted, not a single part. The fat becomes tallow for candles. The skin is boiled down for gelatin. The meat is salted, smoked, or dried until it could outlast a siege. You help stuff extra straw under the bedding, making the nest a little thicker. You gather rushes for the floor and change them out once they've gone too soft and slimy. You help your mother stitch patches onto everyone's cloaks, or line the inside of boots with moss. Anything that keeps out the cold. Historians still argue whether peasants truly expected to make it through winter or simply hoped to survive with the least damage. Was it about resilience or resignation? Hard to say, but either way, the work never stopped. And, despite the cold, you didn't stay indoors. You couldn't. The animals needed tending, water needed fetching, tools needed mending. And your fields didn't care that your fingers were blue and your boots leaked. Even the village priest, bundled in 3 layers of linen, would nod grimly when he saw you out there, chopping wood with numb hands and cursing softly under your breath. Let's talk about those boots for a second. They're probably made of leather, with the soles stitched by someone local. There's no waterproofing, no insulation. If you're lucky, they're lined with wool. If you're unlucky, they've cracked and the cold seeps in like fog. You might wrap your feet in rags or stuff them with straw. You might even go barefoot around the hearth, letting your skin slowly thicken into something closer to bark. Above Your tunic is the same every day. Wool, dyed in browns or grays, maybe a faded indigo if your family had a good year. Over it, a cloak, thick and hooded, pinned at the shoulder. You keep it on indoors and out, because there's no such thing as inside warmth. The hearth helps, sure, but only if you sit right next to it. Walk 5 feet away and the air bites again. Food is the other great defense against winter. Not abundance, don't get the wrong idea. You don't feast, but you plan. Dried beans, salted fish, pickled turnips, smoked meat. The cellar holds whatever roots and tubers you've harvested. The loft stores bundles of dried herbs and sacks of grain. Sometimes you chew birch bark just to keep the hunger off. And sometimes you go to bed early, not because you're tired, but because it's the only way to forget you're hungry. Tonight, like every night, you'll all sleep together. Human heat is cheaper than wood. The baby will sleep between parents, the older kids along the wall, grandfather in the warmest corner. Maybe the dog squeezes in, or the goat if it's frost season. Every body adds heat. Every breath contributes. You know that if the cold deepens, you'll wake up coughing. Not because you're sick, but because the air is too dry from the fire, or too damp from the leaks. You'll cough, clear your throat, turn over. Maybe your brother's feet will smack you in the nose. You won't be mad, you'll be glad there. Warm. The cold sharpens your awareness, makes your world smaller. You live for heat in the moment. The cup of broth, the spot by the fire, the afternoon sun on your face. Everything else can wait, because survival isn't about big moves. It's about tiny acts of persistence. You mend one hole, you patch one glove, you find one dry log. You save the last bit of fat from the stew and rub it on cracked hands. You teach your fingers to work even when they can't feel. And when the sun sets early now, always too early, you draw the curtain across the doorway and let the dark take the world. You sleep with your family, under your one blanket, on your one patch of straw. You dream of warmer days, or you don't dream at all, but you make it through. You wake and you work. Asterisk, the wind outside winds through the chinks in the wall, and you pull your cloak tighter, already bracing for the day ahead. It's washing day, or, at least, as close as your household gets to one. And that means cold hands, wet clothes, and more bending, lifting, scrubbing, and hauling than your aching back thinks reasonable before sunrise. Your linen underclothes have grown stiff with use, the sleeves darkened from weeks of sweat and soot. They smell medieval, that sour, earthy mix of human labor, damp fabric, wood smoke, and the faintest trace of sour milk. You know it well. So today, you haul the basket of dirties to the river with your sister, your mother, or the neighbor down the lane, whoever scheduled the wash with your family, because laundry, in your world, isn't a solo mission. It's a group effort, a social event, a punishing necessity. The river is frigid, always, and in the colder months, you're sometimes smashing through ice with the back of the laundry paddle. Just to get started, washing clothes in the Middle Ages is no gentle cycle. There's no soap unless your family's made a bak, recently a grueling task involving ashes, animal fat, and boiling water, so you make do. You scrub with sand or lye, maybe brush things out with a stiff bristle made from pig hair. You slap the cloth on rocks or heavy planks, rhythmically pounding the grime out while the cold chews into your wrists. You kneel in the silt and watch the steam rise from your own breath. Your fingernails go purple, your knuckles redden and crack, and still you scrub, because walking around with visibly dirty clothes is embarrassing. Even now, you're not a beggar, yet. You pause to wring out a tunic, the twisted wool gushing brown-tinged water as you twist. You wonder how long it'll take to dry. That depends on the weather and your luck. Drying racks are a luxury. Most days, the clothes get hung over fences, shrubs, rafters, or even laid on rocks and rooftops. You hope it doesn't rain, or snow, or that the pigs don't knock them down again. Clothing itself is scarce. Most peasants only own a few garments, sometimes just one set for daily work and one kept cleaner for church. Even children often go without underwear until they're older, if ever. And everything you own has likely been mended more times than you can count. A missing sleeve doesn't mean you toss the shirt. It means you get creative with your stitching. Asterisk, historians still argue whether medieval peasants were as perpetually filthy as stereotypes suggest, or if they were more invested in cleanliness than later eras gave them credit for. Some records point to routine bathing, washing days, even personal grooming habits involving combs, tweezers, and herbal rinses. Others, of course, describe the smells in graphic detail. Either way, you do what you can. After the wash, you rub your hands together, trying to generate a little warmth. Maybe you stop by a fire pit on the way back. Maybe someone's roasting onions or turnips, and you steal a whiff as you pass. When you return home, the house smells of boiling broth and damp wool. Your clothes are heavy with water. Your arms are tired, and you've only just started your chores. There's a pile of reeds to be woven into mats. The goat knocked over the feet again, and your younger sibling just stepped in something unholy that needs to be scraped off the threshold. So you do what anyone in your position would. You take a deep breath, roll your sleeves up, and get to it. Later, if you're lucky, you'll get to sit for a bit and do handwork, sewing, spinning, maybe even darning socks or patching up shoes. Your fingertips are already rough and calloused, so the tiny needle pricks don't even register anymore. You work with what you have. Your needle might be bone or bronze, your thread pulled from old garments, or twisted from plant fibers or animal sinew. Buttons haven't been invented yet, not the way you think of them. So you tie things with laces or loop fabric around simple wooden toggles. When something rips, you don't panic. You fix it. You always fix it. You glance at the window, a square of stretched linen, not glass. Light filters in as a dull glow. No direct sun, no dramatic shadows, just a steady illumination that tells you time is passing, and you better not waste it. Not that you have the luxury of wasting anything. Not light, not firewood, not even rags. Every scrap of cloth, every piece of old clothing, is saved. Old tunics become padding for boots. Ragged shifts turn into bandages or dishcloths. Even the strings from worn-out cloaks are unpicked and rewound into thread. Nothing dies in a medieval house. It just changes jobs. That by mid-afternoon, you might finally get a moment to pause. Maybe someone's brought news from the next village over. Maybe there's a traveler staying in the barn, and you've been told to bring them water or bread. Hospitality matters, even when you have little, especially when you have little. And who knows, that traveler might trade a story or a song for a meal, or share gossip about the Lord's manor, or news of strange omens in the sky. You listen while folding the still damp clothes, breathing in the smell of river water, ash, and wool. Your body aches, but your ears stay sharp. Later still, just before dusk, you'll help bring the clothes in cold and stiff from the air. You fold them roughly and set them near the hearth, hoping the lingering heat will finish the job. You rub your cracked hands with leftover grease from dinner, trying to stave off the worst if the chapping. And when someone asks why you look so tired, you just laugh. You're not tired. You're alive. You're cleanish, and you made it through one more winter wet washing day. Evening settles like a slow exhale, and the house dims to a flickering gloom, lit only by fire and tallow. You've returned from the fields, or the river, or wherever the day's work has left you. Your limbs are heavy. Your tunic smells faintly of smoke and sheep. Your hands are stained and sore. But before you even consider sleep, there's one last duty that must be seen to. Dinner now. Let's temper your expectations. There's no table groaning with roasted meats, no braided bread, baskets or flagons of red wine. You don't ladle stew into a ceramic bowl and sit down with a polished spoon. You scrape what's left of yesterday's pottage, slow-boiled mush of beans, root vegetables, barley, and maybe a whisper of meat into a shared pot and coax it to a boil over the hearth. You don't eat alone. You rarely ever do. The whole household, siblings, cousins, in-laws, even an occasional neighbor gathers around the warmth of the fire. And if space is tight, you sit in turns or lean against walls. Some crouch on heels, others squat or settle onto low stools. No one's angling for the head of the table because, frankly, there probably isn't one. Dinner, such as it is scooped from the pot with rough wooden ladles and eaten from trenches hardened slabs of coarse bread, often reused until they're too soggy to salvage. You chew slowly, not because you're savoring, but because the pottage is thick, hot, and full of lumps. Occasionally, you crunch down on something that might be a grain of grit or a tiny bone, and you just carry on. What's in your meal depends entirely on what's grown nearby and what's in season. Turnips, onions, cabbage, peas. If you're lucky, a strip of salted pork or a piece of eel snared from the stream. Meat is rare, saved for feast days, weddings, funerals, or when something drops dead inconveniently. You do what you can with herbs, with scraps, with creativity. Small beer is passed around, weak ale. barely strong enough to buzz, but just potent enough to make questionable river water safe to swallow. Children drink it too, along with thin milk or watered-down broth. You nurse your wooden cup and try not to think about how long it's been since it was properly scrubbed, or whether the dog licked it. Historians still argue whether the medieval diet was nutrient-rich or dangerously deficient. On paper, it looks better than some later periods. Lots of fiber, seasonal vegetables, no processed sugars, but in practice, you're hungry a lot, and there's never enough of anything you truly crave. You reach for a hunk of coarse rye bread, crusty and dense. It's filling but dry, so you dip it in the broth, letting it soften before tearing it with your teeth. You wipe your mouth with your sleeve, napkins, please. You're already wearing your towel. Occasionally, someone cracks a joke, or a story bubbles up. There's laughter, there's bickering. One of the toddlers throws a spoon, and the dog licks porridge off the floor. The old uncle mutters about how things were better before the last frost took the apple trees. Someone else swears they saw a fox in the yard again, and just like that, you're reminded. Food might be humble, but dinner is rich with voices, with warmth, with shared breath. You finish eating, set your cup down beside the hearth, and stretch your legs out toward the fading coals. The heat is patchy, your feet are warm, your back stays cold. That's just how it is. The dishes, if they can even be called that, are rinsed in a basin and wiped with the cleanest rag that isn't currently in use as a diaper. Utensils are scarce. Everyone knows which spoon is theirs, and woe to the soul who misplaces it. You glance at the single candle on the shelf. Its stubby light wavers in the draft. You won't be staying up long. Not because you're disciplined, but because there's no reason to fight the dark. It wins every night, anyway. You rise and pad across the uneven floor. It's packed earth, cool and dusty, with rushes scattered in patches for traction and odor control. The rushes crackle softly, underfoot, releasing faint smells of mint, sage, or lavender. Someone remembered to mix them in. More often, it smells faintly of chicken droppings and wet boots. You get used to it. You pull off your belt, unlace your tunic, and fold it beside the bed door. What passes for one? It's a shared sleeping mat of straw and rags, a slight rise off the ground, if you're lucky, and your blanket smells like every person who's ever used it before you. You don't wrinkle your nose, you just burrow in. The air inside is colder than you want it to be. If it's winter, your breath clouds above you in the dark. You shiver and instinctively scoot closer to the warm bulk of your brother, cousin, or whoever else is nestled in the communal heap tonight. There's no privacy, no bedtime routine. Just a slow surrender to warmth and weariness. You feel a heel press against your shin. Someone mutters in their sleep. A dog shifts near the hearth, snuffling into a blanket. You exhale, and this, right here, this quiet, huddled moment in the dim is the most peace you'll get today. Still hungry, yes, still tired, always, but for now, the fire still glows, and your belly has something in it. And you made it through another day, asterisk. It's well past dark now, but night in the medieval world doesn't come with silence. As you lie there, pressed between bafties and scratchy wool, you hear it, the creak of beams as the house settles into cold, the soft grunt of a pig rolling in its straw corner, the faint scratch of mice in the thatch above. The wind pushes against the wattled walls, whistling through unseen gaps. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks once and is answered. You shift on the straw pallet. A sharp bit of stalk pokes your shoulder, but you don't move. You're used to it. You've learned how to ignore a lot of things: itchy bites, crooked limbs, the constant press of other people. Because here's the truth, you never really sleep alone, not unless you're sick, or shunned, or dead. Tonight, you're tucked into a nest of siblings and cousins, the occasional elbow to the ribs, a familiar punctuation to the shared warmth. Your youngest brother's feet are under your thigh. Someone else's breath is hot on your neck. The smell of bodies and smoke lingers, mingling with wool grease and something vaguely sour. Milk, maybe. Could be the mash fermenting by the hearth. And yet, despite it all, you drift. The rhythms of shared slip-a-cough, the turn, the soft mumbler, as familiar as the toll of the church bell. Your mind begins to float, untethered. You dream of fields again, of impossible green hills, of bread that's always warm. But you don't sleep straight through. Few people do. You wake in the dark, heart thumping from a noise outside, a sudden clatter, a low growl, or the flap of wings. You blink at the blackness, eyes wide and useless, and wait. Nothing. Just the house shifting, the fire popping. You pull the blanket higher and roll over, Midnight in the medieval world isn't just the halfway point of night, it's a transition, a kind of limbo. Many believed it was when spirits walked and mischief brewed. The church had rules about it. Folklore warned against wandering. That's why the door is barred with a wooden beam tonight, and why a sprig of herbs hangs over the threshold. You don't take chances. Historians still argue whether this nighttime fear was cultural programming or genuine supernatural belief. But either way, people acted like it mattered, and so do you. Sometimes, if you're particularly unlucky, you're woken by cold, deep, bone-deep cold that settles in and refuses to leave. You huddle tighter. In winter, you may have even brought the animals inside: chickens, dogs, even a pig or two just for warmth. It's not cozy, it's strategy. Chickens don't freeze. You do. There's a ritual to the midnight stirrings. Someone rises to stoke the fire. A coal is nudged back to life. The room glows orange, casting long shadows. Maybe someone else gets up to relieve themselves in a chamber pot tucked by the wall, trying not to tip it over in the dark. You half sleep through it all. The house breathes around you in wealthier homes. The night is more segmented. Some lords and ladies rise for a second supper, a prayer, even a whispered discussion. It's the origin of first sleep and second sleep. And no, it's not just a modern myth. There's record after record of people treating the night like two distinct sleep sessions, with a waking intermission in the middle, sometimes an hour or more long. Imagine that, a sanctioned, structured insomniac's dream, but not you. Your waking interlude is unplanned. It's cold or coughing or noise or just the pressure of too many limbs. Still, your body adjusts. You roll over, maybe whisper a few sleepy words to whoever's awake. Then the dark folds back in, and in this half-conscious state, time becomes strange. One moment it's midnight, and the next, a rooster calls. The faintest gray glimmers through the cloth-draped window. The coals are mostly ash. Someone nearby groans and mutters about fetching water. Both morning again. You blink, confused. Didn't you just lie down? But that's how it is, sleep in the middle. Ages is a kind of negotiation, not a promise. A truce between your exhaustion and the discomfort of everything around you. And if you're lucky, it works well enough to keep you alive. You stretch, and something pops in your back. You're maybe 30, but you feel 50. Your straw mat has shifted in the night. You're more on the packed earth than off it. You rub your eyes, sit up slowly, and brace for the chill that cuts through your linen shirt. No one really lingers in bed. There's no time. Work begins as soon as the sky hints at light. You know what's ahead: chores, mud, bruised fingers. So you start moving before your brain fully wakes up. It's habit. It's necessity. You reach for your tunic, same one as yesterday, and probably tomorrow. You shake out a few pieces of straw and pull it over your head. It itches. It always itches. The wool is coarse, dyed with something brownish and natural. Fashion isn't a concern. Warmth is the hearth, is mostly embers. Someone adds kindling. Someone else coughs and heads outside. The chickens squawk at the light. A baby cries. It's another day, and you've survived the night. Section 6. The cold clings to everything. Even with the fire faintly rekindled and a few bodies now stirring around you, there's a dampness that sinks into your bones. It's the kind of cold that doesn't just bite, it wraps itself around your ribs and whispers, "You're mine now." You shift your feet inside stiff leather shoes and wonder how long until your toes stop feeling like little stones. You duck outside. It's barely dawn, and the world is gray. The frost crystals cling to the edges of the thatch and grass like medieval lace. The air smells of smoke, manure, and something sharpest, maybe, or your neighbor's sour mash. Your breath fogs, the air like a small ghost. The well is a short walk away, but the path is rutted and slick. You haul the wooden bucket, fingers stiff on the rope handle, hoping it doesn't crack again from the cold. Frozen wood is treacherous. The water in the bucket is frigid and glassy. A thin crust of ice has formed at the top. You break it with a stick, then scoop out enough for the morning rinse. Back inside, your family takes turns at the basin. It's not a bath. It's not even truly clean, but it wakes you up, and it's better than nothing. You splash water on your face, and the shock makes your teeth clack. No, soap is a luxury. Maybe your family makes it, from ash and tallow, and an afternoon of gag-worthy boiling. But you're out of it this week, so it's water. Just water, cold, pure, and stinging. The kind that reminds you, immediately, that you're alive. You wipe your face with a bit of rough cloth, then move on to food. Or what passes for it. A heel of rye bread, left from yesterday, maybe dipped in warm broth if there's any. If you're lucky, there's something bubbling at the hearth, some thin porridge made of barley, or leftover stew with turnips and bits of mystery meat. Everyone eats quickly. There's no sitting around a table. No one has time for that. You crouch or sit on a low stool, hunched around the warmth of the fire. Someone elbows you in the ribs. You elbow back. It's the morning ballet, cramped and crowded, and through it all, there's conversation. Nothing deep, just murmured jokes, light insults, questions about the weather, and always, gossip. Someone's pig went missing. Someone saw a monk walking too close to the widow's house. Someone says there's frost inside the church. This week, right on the altar, scandalous. Historians still argue whether this kind of idle talk was a key part of peasant bonding, or just noise to survive the silence. But to you, it's life, it's texture, and maybe a bit of mental heat. Once fed and faintly clean, you layer on whatever extra warmth you have. A heavier cloak, if you're lucky. A patched-up hood, mittens made from scrap wool, if you haven't sold them, or borrowed from someone whose hands are warmer than yours. And now comes the real business of surviving cold. Moving, because the worst thing you can do is stand still. You head out with the others, some to chop wood, some to feed the animals, some to fix fences, or tend firewood piles, or repair tools. Everyone has a task. No one stands idle in winter. That's a fast track to frostbite, or worse. You trudge through the cold like a slow-moving caravan of tasks and breath clouds. The ground is slick with rime. Every step crunches. Tools feel heavier because your fingers aren't working right. The axe is particularly cruel. It's metal, icy, and unyielding. You wrap your hands in fabric, but the cold seeps through like a curse. Still, there's something comforting about the rhythm. Chop, drag, pile, chop, drag, pile. Your body warms from movement. Your breath slows. You start to sweat a little, and for a brief moment, you're almost comfortable. Almost. Lunch is eaten standing up, maybe another hunk of bread, or something scooped out of a cloth wrapping. No utensils, just hands. The food is cold by now, but it fills your belly, and that's all that matters. You crouch near the fire after letting your limbs thaw, if only briefly. Some neighbors stop by to trade a few goods, maybe a skein of yarn for a bit of lard, or some firewood for eggs. Everything is barter. Coins are rare and precious. You nod your greetings, exchange your bits, and move on. The sun never really breaks through today. It hangs pale and uncertain behind a veil of winter mist. Around mid-afternoon, the air starts to bite harder. The shadows grow longer, darker. You feel the shift in your bones. It's time to wrap up, head back, beat the dock, because that's the other danger of winter. Short days. If you're not home before the light fails, you risk more than stubbed toes. You risk getting lost, or slipping on ice, or meeting someone that prefers the cold and dark. So you hurry. Tools are packed away. Animals secured. The house looms ahead, warm in comparison. You duck inside and shake off the cold. Your cloak is stiff. Your fingers numb again. The hearth is glowing stronger now. Someone's been feeding it. There's a pot hanging above its stew again. You help stir, taste, adjust the salt. You settle down, sighing. The heat creeps back in. And you survived another cold day. Night falls early in winter. You barely finish your stew before the sky begins its slow collapse into blackness. The hearth crackles, casting warm amber light across the dirt floor. Shadows dance along the Watalando walls, elongated, flickering, sometimes making strange shapes that catch the corner of your eye. Someone mutters a prayer. Someone else farts. It's communal living at its most. Intimate. You clean your bowl with a bit of stale bread and pop it in your mouth. Waste nothing, that's the rule. And you follow it because you've seen what waste looks like. A child scraping flour from a rafter beam. A dog gnawing on a hoof left out too long. Now comes the evening ritual. Not one of silence or solitude, but of layering. You wrap yourself in anything you can find. Your outer cloak, an extra bit of linen, that scratchy wool cap you swore you'd never wear again. Anything to beat the night chill. The fire will burn for a while longer, but it won't last till morning. It never does. Wood is precious, and it burns fast. You all pretend not to notice when someone saves a larger log to toss in later. Code 4. I'm waking early and claiming that heat. The pigs are already snoring softly in their corner. Yes, pigs. They're inside the house. Not because it's cozy, but because they're warm. And if they freeze outside, you'll lose more than bacon. You'll lose income, maybe survival. Chickens roost up high, if you're lucky enough to have a beam for them. A goat might huff once in a while. This is your life. A barn, a bed, and a home all in one. You help settle the little ones into the sleeping nest. It's not really a bed, more of a padded depression in the floor, lined with straw and rushes, covered in rough wool blankets. If you're lucky, there's a thin mattress, stuffed with heather or hay. You fluff it half-heartedly, pulling out a sharp stalk or two. It's no feather bed, but it's better than bare earth. Everyone sleeps together. There's no MySpace or your corner. There's just a pile of people and warmth. You wedge yourself in, hoping for a good spot close to the fire, but not too close, far from the door. You pull the blanket up to your chin and try not to think about the flea you just felt crawl across your cheek. That sleep comes in layers. First, there's that early fog drifting in and out while others settle. You hear someone whispering a prayer. Someone else coughs. A child whimpers in their sleep. Someone rolls over and their elbow lands on your neck. It's a process, and yet, despite the cramped conditions, the cold, the smell, sleep arrives. Eventually, historians still argue whether people in the medieval period slept in segmented cycles, 2 blocks of sleep, broken by a period of wakefulness in the middle of the night, or whether that's just the quirk of certain written accounts. But you know this much. Once you're warm, once your muscles stop twitching, once you've found the exact patch of straw that doesn't stab your hip, you're out, until you're not. Because of course, someone always wakes up. Maybe it's the pigs shifting. Maybe it's a snore so loud it rattles the beams. Maybe it's the cold creeping in. Despite the fire's last embers still glowing like dull rubies, you wake in that halfware state, your breath puffing gently upward. You see the ceiling beams above, thick with soot and cobwebs. You pull the blanket tighter, and maybe, just maybe, you think it's during these quiet, dark moments that thoughts sneak in. You wonder about your cousin in the next village, who hasn't visited since harvest. You wonder if you'll have enough grain to last to spring. You wonder what that noise was last night in the woods, fox or something worse. You think about God, about sin, about how sore your knees are, and then, maybe, you drift off again. This is winter survival, not in the grand, cinematic sense, but in the 1,000 small choices and adaptations that make it through the coldest nights. You have no central heating, no electric blanket, no thick down comforter. You have bodies, blankets, fire. You have endurance. There's comfort, too, in routine. You know how to stack the wood to burn longest. You know which part of the blanket smells like goat and which doesn't. You know who kicks in their sleep. You know the rhythm of this season. Early, dark, cramped, warmth, shared dreams, and sore backs. Tomorrow, you'll do it all again. Wake, stretch, wince, work, shiver, eat, collapse. You're a cog in the cycle, but you're not alone. And that, somehow, makes the frost feel a little less cruel. You stir in the dark, the edges of sleep peeling away slowly as your body aches against the stiff straw mattress. The fire is out. Of course it is. The last coals gave up their glow hours ago, and the room now breathes a different kind of simplest heavier, colder, sharper. Someone's breath whistles through a congested nose. Someone else shuffles under the blanket, pulling it tighter. You lift the edge, half frozen, half determined, and rise just enough to peer into the blackness. It's not yet dawn, but it will be, and the morning doesn't wait for warmth. You slip out quietly, careful not to step on limbs or pigs. Your toes instantly find the icy dirt floor, and you suppress a hiss. Even the air feels like it bites. You find your cloak and tug it on, still heavy with yesterday's moisture. It smells like wool and smoke. You love it. You hate it. You need it. Now comes the business of surviving the medieval morning when the cold is at its cruelest, and your body hasn't yet remembered how to move. Outside, the night hasn't fully lifted. The sky is pale, washed in steel and ash, but the stars are gone. Frost glitters along the wooden lintel, and you take a moment to brace yourself before you unlatch the door and step out. Instantly, your breath fogs, your cheeks sting. It's cold enough that your eyelashes feel stiffed. Make for the bucket. Frozen. Of course. You knock at the ice with the wooden ladle until it cracks. a sound louder than it should be in the stillness. You scoop out enough slush to splash on your face, a brutal shock that snaps the last clinging webs of sleep from your eyes. No one in your house is awake yet, but they will be, soon. The house will fill with coughs, muttered complaints, the scrape of ladles in pots, and the soft sighs of people trying to stretch muscles before another long day. But right now, you have a moment. You look out over the village. The roofs are white with frost. The thatch gleams faintly in the dim light, like each blade was hands. Smoke rises from a few chimneys, just wisps at first, curling like ghosts into the sky. Somewhere, a rooster gives a half-hearted crow. You stand there, wrapped in a stiff wool cloak, your feet numb, your nose running, and for a moment just one knits quiet enough to feel sacred. You aren't rich. You aren't powerful. You don't have a feather bed or a fire that lasts the night. But you are alive. And that, especially now, feels like something. You return inside, nudging the door closed behind you. The latch clicks. Others are beginning to stir. Someone groans. Someone farts. The pigs grunt from their corner. You toss a few dried rushes on the fire pit, gently coaxing the coals back to life. There's a trick to entangle breath, patience. The first curl of smoke brings tears to your eyes. You fan it with your sleeve until a tiny flame flickers up. Victory. Someone behind you mutters, "Blessed be." You don't know if they mean the fire or the fact that you're up before them. Maybe both. Now begins the cycle. Stirring porridge, breaking off bread, checking on the stew that's still warm from last night's heat. There's no such thing as a fresh breakfast in winter. Just continuation. You find a crust of rye bread and soak it in broth. It softens. Barely. You eat in silence, crouched beside the hearth. The taste is earthy, bland, but filling. That's enough. Others begin to move now. A mother bundles a toddler in layers of wool. A brother pulls on boots, still damp from yesterday's snow. You all dress like onions, layer after layer of cloth and leather, wool and hope. You add your own linen shirt, coarse tunic, hose, outer cloak, leather belt, the laces at your side tugged tight. No buttons, yet not common folk. Laces, pins, hooks. If you're fancy, you tie a cloth around your head. Not just for warmth, it's habit. Your hair's oily, your scalp itches, and head coverings keep lice somewhat in check. Plus, no one likes seeing your bedhead. Once dressed, you step outside again. More villagers are up now. Fires start across the village like stars of red through doorways, wisps of smoke joining yours in the air. People greet each other with nods, half-grunts, or a muttered, cold one. And it is, but you all move anyway. Children gather kindling. A man swings a bucket toward the well, his breath puffing out in rhythmic bursts. Someone is already sweeping the frost from a bench with a bundled broom. No one has to say what to do. You've done this every day of your life. This is winter. Not a single snow-covered painting in a gallery. Not a charming sleigh ride, but a slow battle against numb fingers, aching joints, and a hunger that never fully fades. Still, somehow, there's a rhythm. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants truly suffered more in winter, or whether their seasonal routines were simply better adapted to the chill. Some believe people hibernated more, worked less. Others argued the work just changed shape from harvesting fields to mending tools, spinning wool, repairing thatch. But you don't debate, you do. Today, your job might be chopping wood, mending a fence, or digging trenches to redirect melt. Winter doesn't stop labor, it just shifts it indoors, closer to home, where breath still fogs and fingertips still burn. The sun finally crests the treetops, pale and weak, but enough. Light spills across the frost and catches the thatch in gold. Someone laughs, someone sneezes. Another day begins, and you're here for it. Your boots crunch over frozen dirt as you head toward the edge of the village, breath pluming in front of you with every step. There's a simple kind of beauty in how everything sparkles, the frost catching, in ruts of cart tracks, on crooked fence posts, in the soft fur of the dog trotting beside you, tail up and proud. You're out to fetch firewood. Again, that it doesn't matter that you did it yesterday. The fire eats through logs like a hungry child, and if you let it go out, the cold will claim everything: your fingers, your sleep, your sourdough starter. Okay, maybe not the last one, but still, best not to risk it. You pass a neighbor hunched beside a stack of chopped wood, his breath steaming as he sharpens his hatchet on a river stone. He gives you a nod, doesn't stop working, neither do you. The woods are close just beyond the field, past the hedgerow rimed with frost. Trees stand like silent monks, bare and bone-thin, and everything out here creaks. Branches, boots, your knees. You gather fallen limbs, cradling them in your arms. It's easier than chopping, and you're careful not to stray too far. Foxes aren't the only things in the woods. Boars still roam, even now. And there are whispers, old stories of spirits in the thickets, of children who wandered too deep and never came out again. You've never seen anything yourself, but still, you glance over your shoulder now and then. Your fingers go stiff, your nose drips, and the cold finds the seam between your sleeve and glove. You grit your teeth and keep gathering. Once the bundle is full, you trudge back, feeling like a beast of burden. The path is muddy in places where frost has already begun to melt, leaving little pits of slush. You nearly slip, catch yourself, and mutter something very unholy under your breath. Good thing the priest isn't around. Back at the house, you stack the wood beside the hearth. Someone claps you on the shoulder. Good haul, you grunt. Your hands burn as the blood returns. You shake them out like a dog flinging water. And someone laughs. Then, it's time for another daily trial. Laundry. Now, here's where the glamour really kicks in. You haul a basket to the streamiest in the freezing cold and set about rinsing clothes that haven't seen soap in weeks. The icy water numbs your arms to the elbow, and every slap of fabric against stone is a small revenge against your own body. The stream bubbles along, unbothered by your suffering. Little flecks of ice cling to the edges, and your breath rises like a dragon's. Laundry in winter is a cruel joke. You wash, wring, and then hang the clothes to freeze dry on a line strung between trees. They turn stiff as boards, fluttering like flags of surrender. Still, they smell cleaner, and you'll take that. While you work, others pass by. A boy with a wooden yoke and twin buckets bouncing from his shoulders. An older woman carrying a lidded basket, bread probably, or herbs wrapped in cloths. Everyone has a task. No one walks empty-handed. That's a rule of survival. You head back with the frozen laundry tucked under one arm. Still a little wet. You'll hang it by the fire later. Let the warmth finish what the cold started. Inside, the hearth crackles softly now, and someone's heating broth. The smell is strong turnips and something slightly sour but warm. Comfort is relative. You set the clothes near the fire. Hang a few over the frame your uncle made last spring. One sleeve immediately begins to steam. Another falls and lands directly on the hot stones. You snatch it up before it chars, and someone makes a joke about you cooking your trousers. The day inches along. Tasks bleed into one another. A neighbor stops by to barter for wool, offering a small wheel of hard cheese in return. You agree? Cheese is life. You would trade your last spoon for a good wheel. You sit for a moment, mending a tear in your tunic with clumsy stitches. Thread is precious. So are needles. Lose one, and you're stuck poking cloth with a chicken bone. Yes, people tried it. No, it didn't go well. The room smells like smoke, old onions, and damp wool. But it's warm, and that's enough to make you sigh, shoulders lowering just a bit. Then comes the chore everyone dreads, cleaning the hearth. Ashes. Necessary, messy, and weirdly sacred. You scoop out the cooled ashes into a clay pot, carefully, so as not to stir dust into your nose. These ashes might be reused, spread on icy pads, or added to soap mixtures. Nothing is wasted, ever. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants truly understood sanitation or just lucked into habits that kept disease somewhat at bay. Some records suggest they cleaned regularly out of superstition, fearing spirits that nested in filth. Others think they just didn't like the smell. Either way, you clean, and it helps. Evening starts to creep in. The light fades. Not much left to do, but your body still buzzes with cold, with motion, with hunger. You grab the last of the firewood, stack it tighter, and sit back with a mug of watered ale, lukewarm, but oddly refreshing. Someone's singing softly in the corner. A child, maybe, or your sister. A tune passed down from someone long dead, full of strange words, and a melody that feels older than the village. For just a moment, you're not cold, you're not tired, you're simply here. Living, surviving, and somehow. Despite the frost, despite the aches, despite everything, you're okay. The wind is howling outside now, like a beast pacing the edges of the thatched roof, testing for weaknesses. You hear it whistle through the cracks in the Watalando walls and feel it tug faintly at the wooden shutters. One of them rattles, and someone wedges a lump of firewood against it to keep it still. You're huddled close to the hearth, sitting on a stool that leans slightly to one side. A blanket drapes over your shoulders, scratchy, a little damp from yesterday's use, but warm. Your fingers are stiff from the cold and from the endless small tasks of the day: wood chopping, stitching, carrying water, folding stiff laundry, scraping dishes. And yet, there's something comforting in the routine, something rhythmic, even meditative. Tonight is a quiet one. No feasting, no guests, no loud arguments about who forgot to close the chicken coop. Just the low murmur of your family, the creak of settling wood, and the occasional snore from someone who's already nodded off in the corner. Your mother is darning socks by candlelight, her hands moving with quiet precision. The glow paints her face in flickering gold, softening the lines worn deep from years of labor and cold seasons like this one. She doesn't speak. She just hums, a tune you think might be older than the church bell. You nibble on a crust of rye bread. It's gone hard, but dipping it into warm broth has softened it enough to chew. It tastes of salt, root vegetables, and a whisper of herbs. Maybe time, maybe just your imagination. Someone farts, loudly. There's a beat of silence, then laughter, because cold or no, some things never change. There's a moment where you look around the room, the glow of the hearth flickering on faces, the pile of straw in the corner where your little brother already sleeps like a collapsed tent, the clatter of a spoon hitting the floor and someone grumbling as they stoop to fetch a tent. You realize something. You are not alone in this. That's the truth of winter survival. Really, it isn't just about fire or food or thick woolen cloaks. It's about the people packed into a too small space, breathing the same smoky air, elbowing each other during sleep, passing down stories, while mending clothes or picking lice out of each other's hair. It's deeply human. There's a strange comfort in that. You think back to stories you've heard about nobles in great stone keeps, sleeping with fur blankets so heavy they needed servants just to turn them over, about monks in cold abbeys, rising, in the dark, to chant prayers while their toes slowly froze in their sandals. You've never seen a castle. You're not likely to, but you suspect sometimes they might be colder than your house. At least here, everyone is close, and if you need help, someone will hear you. You lie down early. There's no reason to stay up late when there's no light, and no tavern nearby. Besides, tomorrow will be another haul of cold chores. Another winter sunrise where you wake to frost in your eyelashes. You settle into the bedalow, shared nest of straw, rags, and warm, tangled limbs. Tonight, it's you, your younger brother, and your uncle who snores like an ox with a head cold. You stuff a bit of cloth in your ear. Doesn't help. It never does. But the warmth builds. Your own breath joins the others. The air smells like old wool, baked root vegetables, wood smoke, and feet. You close your eyes, and just when you think sleep will find you, the dog curls up against your back, pressing in like a hot stone fresh from the fire. It's bliss. Sort of. Historians still argue whether these packed sleeping arrangements helped create stronger family bonds or if they were the cause of many a sibling grudge. There's at least one court record from 1387 detailing a dispute over blanket hogging, which led to a rather public brawl and a broken chamber pot. You believe it. Tonight, though, no one's fighting, no one's talking. Just the sound of breathing and wind and the occasional creak of the ceiling beams shifting under the weight of frost. You let your mind wander. What if you could light the fire with just a switch? What if your clothes dried in a magic box? What if you could heat water, actual hot water, without a kettle and a hearth? You'd be a wizard, no doubt, burned as a heretic in half the countryside. Or maybe you'd just live longer, with fewer chilblains. Still, this is your world, one of earth and straw, of flickering firelight and cold hands, of whispered stories passed down and half-remembered prayers muttered against the dark. And tomorrow, you'll rise again before the sun. You'll scrape ice from the basin, pull stiff clothing over your chilled limbs, and trudge out into the morning with a yawn and a muttered complaint. Because that's what survival is. Not dramatic, not glorious, just persistent. And, sometimes, surprisingly beautiful. You wake to the sound of coughing, not yours. Not exactly alarming either, just the familiar, hacking start to a winter day. Your uncle, probably trying to clear the cold from his lungs with his usual symphony of throat noises and complaints. It's still pitch dark inside the house, but you can feel the cold even before you open your eyes. The warmth that built up overnight is quickly leaking out into the morning air. A foot is resting on your back, another digs into your hip. You gently shift the sleeping body of your little brother, dead weight, breath hot against your neck. The dog grumbles but doesn't move. You sit up slowly. The blanket slides off your shoulders and releases a puff of cold that raises the hair on your arms. It's not snowing inside, thank goodness, but it's not far off. The air feels like it's biting you just for daring to breathe. Your breath clouds in the dark, and that's your cue. The hearth has long since gone out. The coals are just faint glimmers beneath a heap of gray ash. You sigh. It's your turn. You tiptoe over snoring bodies to the hearth, kneel on stiff knees, and begin poking at the ash. With luck, there's still some life left. You blow on it gently. Your breath feels like it might freeze before it reaches the embers. Nothing. Fine. You grab the flint and steel, muttering softly as your fingers struggle to grip the cold metal. Your hands are not quite awake, but you are fully, miserably awake. Sparks fly. You coax them onto a twist of dried rushes. One catches, flares, then dies. Again and again. The dogs started licking itself loudly in the background. It's not helping your focus. Finally, you catch the fire. The rush glows red, then orange, then flames up just enough to light the slivers of dry wood you've arranged like a tiny bonfire. It smells like smoke, dust, and hope. The fire grows, slowly, and with it, the day. People start to stir behind you. There's some muffled grumbling, the slap of bare feet against cold, packed earth, a baby whining from beneath a mound of blankets. Your mother appears beside you, shawl wrapped tight, and hands you a kettle without a word. She's always had this gift for communicating exactly how much work there is to be done just by existing. You fill the kettle from the water bucket, which has a skin of ice over the top. You crack it with a stick. The sound is sharp and clean. This is the dance of winter mornings in a medieval household. No one's brushing their teeth. That's not a thing. You splash your face barely, flinching at the shotgun, then scrub your hands dry with a rough bit of cloth that doubles as a towel, rag, and sometimes potholder. Then comes food. Or, more accurately, a consultation with whatever survived last night's cold. There's a pot of something near the hearth still vaguely warm, a porridge of oats, cabbage, and yesterday's peas. Delicious? No. Sustaining? Barely. But it's hot. And hot food counts as magic when your bones feel like frozen fence posts. You chew slowly. The texture is complicated, but it gives you something to focus on besides the stinging of your feet. Now that the fire's up and the room's a little brighter, you help your mother shake out the rush mats and beat the dust off the cloaks. Some of them froze overnight. Not a joke, literally stiff with frost along the edges. The chickens are awake. You hear them clucking irritably through the boards of their pen near the wall. If you don't let them out soon, they'll start a protest. You pull on your boots' wooden soles, leather tops, and step outside. It's still dawn, barely, but the frost has painted the yard in shimmering silver. Your breath pours out in clouds. The world feels hushed, as if even the trees are still trying to stay under the covers. There's a debate among historians about how much work medieval people did in winter. Some argue that it was a slower time, a season of rest, mending, and stories by the fire. Others suggest it was just as busy, only colder, and that you had to work twice as hard for half the results. You suspect both are true, depending on the week. Today, busily, there's firewood to chop, animals to feed, scraps to clear, and a trip to the stream planned if it's not frozen over to solid. You've got a new hole in your only decent pair of socks, and if you don't patch it today, you'll regret it tomorrow. Your cousin's family down the lane lost a pig last night, not to wolves, thankfully, but to the cold. It just lay down and didn't get back up. That's one less salted ham this winter, and probably a few fewer meals. The news spreads like frost over a window pane, fast, silent, and sharp. You return inside, fingers stinging, and rejoin the morning rush. The house is alive now. Everyone talking, moving, dressing, scratching. Someone's complaining about last night's bedfellow stealing all the blankets. Again. You help your sister braid her hair. She has the thickest, most uncooperative locks in the village, and this is your morning penance. You work your fingers through the tangles while she winces theatrically. There's a whiff of something nice, apple maybe. You follow it and find your mother has warmed a few bruised fruits near the fire. They're soft, but sweet. It's the closest thing to candy you'll see until spring. You pocket one, surreptitiously, no one sees. You're saving it for tonight, because by then, the house will be cold again. The fire will flicker low. Everyone will gather in the half-light, wrapped in layers, chewing on what's left of the day's energy. Someone will ask for a story, or a song, or just silence, and you'll pull out the warm apple, just a little treasure, just enough to get you through. The wind picks up as the sun drags itself higher into the pale sky, though you wouldn't exactly call it rising, more like glowing feebly through layers of cloud. It's one of those medieval winter days where everything feels like it's happening in sepia. No color, just browns, grays, and the occasional glint of ice. You're already outside again, shoulders hunched against the chill, trying to get the goat to cooperate. She disagrees with the bucket, fiercely. You talk to her like she's a person. Everyone does. Not because you think she understands, though. Maybe she does, but because it helps soften the dull repetition of your chores. Besides, goats are notorious gossips. And you've got your own opinions on who's been watering the ale a bit too much lately. Milking complete. You carry the sloshing bucket back to the house, hands red and raw. Your sister holds the door for you with her foot while carrying 2 bundles of kindling under each arm. Neither of you speaks. You're both too cold and too practiced. Inside, the goat's milk will go to making a soft cheese that tastes better than it smells. Your mother tends the pot, stirring with a wooden paddle that's older than you. She says the trick is in the curdling, but nobody actually knows what the trick is. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it works, then grows a blue fuzz like a witch's blanket. You glance around. The light is stronger now, filtering through the oiled parchment window like weak tea. You start to notice things. A cracked bowl, a crooked shelf, the same clump of cobweb that's been winning the battle for the ceiling corner since late summer. And then you hear the rhythmic creak of the spinning wheel. Your aunt is at it, again, wrapped in her patchwork shawl, eyes squinted, pulling thread from a lump of raw wool. She's been spinning since dawn. She'll be spinning after dusk. It's her version of peace, though she'd never say it aloud. Every household has a spinner, someone who weaves quiet into thread. Cloth is survival, and in winter, everything depends on layers. Wool cloaks, wool hose, wool mitts, even the scratchy undershirts that never quite dry out once damp. Historians sometimes argue whether medieval people truly layered up the way we imagine. Some say yes, absolutely, especially among peasants, who had to make do with what they had. Others argued that most just wore their one best tunic and hoped for the best. Either way, you know this much. If you find a spare scrap of wool, you wrap it around your feet and count yourself blessed. Back outside, you cross paths with the neighbor boy, who's dragging a sled full of frozen dung across the road. His nose is running. His ears are red. He gives you a look that says, "Yup, this is my life." You nod. No words needed. He trudges on. The sled, fire fuel, dried manure burns hot, and it's free. Not pleasant, sure, but the scent of burning dung means your toes will still be on speaking terms with the rest of your body by bedtime. Around mid-morning, a group of older children passes your door carrying bundles of straw. They're heading toward the chapel to help spread fresh bedding for the poor travelers sheltering their puts. It's both a chore and a kind of offering. Warmth is a sacred thing in winter, and giving it to others, even in bundles of straw, earns you quiet respect. One of the children slips on a patch of ice and lets out a stream of creative curses. His older sister smacks the back of his head. He apologizes, only slightly repentant. You decide to go check on the drying herbs stored in the loft. Climbing the ladder stirs an ache in your knees. Or maybe it's the cold in your bones pretending to be old age. Up top, the bundles hang like sleeping bat sage, yarrow, rosemary, and a few weeds that your grandmother insists have medicinal properties. She says they help with everything from colds to ghosts. You believe the cold part. You pluck a bit of thyme to chew. It tastes like dust and bravery. Back on the ground, you stoke the fire again and help your brother grind some dried grain with the cornstone. It's a slow, rhythmic job. One of you turns the heavy upper stone. The other feeds the grain. Eventually, the meal that emerges will become bread or something bread adjacent. Today's batch might be mixed with peas, onion scraps, and a pinch of salt if you're lucky. Some families add ground acorns to stretch their flour, but too many and the bread turns bitter, a known trick, but one you only use when the stores run low. Everyone remembers last year's acorn loaf incident. No one wants a repeat. A knock on the door pulls you from your grinding trance. A traveler, cloaked and hoarfrosted, stands hunched at the threshold. Without a word, your father gestures him in, and just like that, the house gets smaller. He's quiet, grateful, hands a bit too thin for a man his age. He settles near the hearth and accepts the offered broth. Bed space will need to be shuffled tonight, again, but no one complains. Sharing is the law of winter. Historians still argue whether this medieval openness to strangers was necessity or kindness. Probably both. But when a man is near frozen at your door, there's only one real answer. You sit beside the fire again. The traveler coughs into a cloth. Your father hands him a scrap of the soft cheese. No one says anything profound, just nods. The light fades a little. The cold thickens. You'll start the evening chores soon, mending, sweeping, feeding animals, once more. But for now, you press your hands toward the heat, feel your face thaw, and exhale, slowly. It's still morning, technically, but winter days don't bother with strict schedules. They flow in cycles of fire, food, and frost. You survive them minute by minute, warm spell by warm spell, and in this moment, you are warm. By midday, though, it hardly feels any brighter. You find yourself outside again, hunched over a small patch of frozen earth with a dull spade. Not farming, not exactly. Nothing grows now. But the ground needs breaking for tomorrow's compost heap, and your father says the frost won't last much longer. It's a hopeful lie, but one you choose to believe because it keeps your hands moving. There's something oddly comforting about how predictable it all is. The work, the rhythm. You know which muscle will ache before it does, which joint will catch when you twist. You know the order of chores without ever writing a list. It's all stored in your bones now. Winter does that. Nearby, your younger brother chases a chicken with a small basket in hand. The hen is uncooperative and loud. She escapes 3 times before he manages to snag her by the legs. Victory is short-lived, though he trips and faceplants in the dirt. You stifle a laugh and help him up, brushing straw from his cap. His pride is bruised worse than his knees. You hand him a crust of bread in peace offering. You head toward the woodpile, gathering an armful for the evening fire. The logs are damp, the bark flecked with lichen. They'll hiss and spit when they burn. Doesn't matter. Any fire is better than none. As you stack them beside the hearth, your mother starts humming an old tune, something wordless, ancient, passed down from women who once lived in huts, now long buried under moss and memory. The baby cries. Your cousin rocks him gently by the fire, the motion slow and automatic. She's only 14, but she has that calm, tired look that comes from waking up at midnight, again and again, to soothe someone else's problems. In the back corner, your grandfather sleeps in a chair that used to be part of a cart. His mouth is slightly open. He wheezes through a nose broken decades ago, probably in a brawl over a pig. You're not sure if he's dreaming or just conserving energy, but either way, nobody disturbs him. He's earned the right to ignore the cold in his own way. The traveler is still here, sipping watered ale and talking in a low voice with your uncle. They're swapping stories, not gossip, actual stories. About wolves sighted near the old mill, about a bridge that collapsed last autumn, about the monastery where a monk supposedly burst into flame while copying a cursed text. That one gets skeptical looks, but nobody outright dismisses it. You've heard weirder. You bring them both a bit of leftover turnip mash and a heel of bread. They nod, thanks, without pausing their conversation. You linger a moment just to listen. It's how you learn the world beyond your own plot of frozen mud. Historians still argue whether peasant families had leisure time, whether they laughed, told tales, had fun. The stereotype says life was nothing but drudgery. But stories like these, passed down in half-whispers by the hearth, are proof that even when life was short and hard, people made time for something more than survival. You duck outside again, this time to help your sister patch a hole in the thatch roof with bundled reeds. She's halfway up the rickety ladder, muttering about the draft above the sleeping area. You hand her the reeds, then brace the ladder as she works. You both know it's a temporary fix. Everything is really. The wind slices through your tunic. You shiver and tuck your chin deeper into your collar. That's when you see the sky starting to change again. Not darker exactly, just heavier. Thicker clouds moving in. Snow, maybe. You step back inside just as the first flurries start to fall, drifting past the narrow window slits. Someone shuts the door. The room darkens a little, but it also feels warmer, like the whole house collectively exhales. You grab the flint and steel and help relight the fire, coaxing it to life with dry straw and patient breathing. Sparks catch, flames flicker, and within minutes, the hearth crackles again, casting long shadows and gold glows on the walls. Your mother ladles out stew, mostly beans, cabbage, and a few scraps of salted meat. She's not measuring, just trusting the feel of the ladle and the number of mouths in the room. You each get a small bowl, not enough to fill, but enough to stop the ache in your stomach from becoming too sharp. The traveler lifts his spoon in thanks before eating. You nod back. It's all the conversation you need. Later, after the bowls are scraped clean, you sit cross-legged by the fire and start darning a pair of socks. Your stitching is terrible, but it's better than freezing. Toes. Your cousin teases you for the uneven weave. You retaliate by poking him with the needle. The baby laughs, gurgling, and suddenly the whole room feels like it's vibrating with quiet warmth. The light from the hearth paints everyone in flickers like living shadows that refuse to go out. You think about bedtime, even though it's still hours away. You know the drill. You'll all huddle under blankets, cloaks, furs, and whatever else you can find. Someone's feet will be icy. Someone will snore. Someone will whisper one last story. Just before sleep comes, the day isn't over, but the pace has slowed. You've passed the hardest part, keeping busy while the cold wants you still. And now, you can rest again soon. Just a little longer. The wind outside has started howling now, crawling along the wooden beams like an animal with cold breath and claws. It sneaks in through the gaps you've stuffed with rags and moss. But it's no match for the fire end. The bodies huddled around it. Someone is patching a boot by candlelight. Another is plucking lice from a sibling's hair. The baby, finally asleep, is tucked in a cradle close to the hearth, warmed by stones heated earlier in the coals and wrapped in linen. They'll hold the warmth for an hour or two. It's enough. You look around the room, this one-room home that is everything at once. Kitchen, bedroom, nursery, infirmary, shelter. It smells of smoke, sweat, wool, and soup. It sounds like breathing fire and the occasional sigh, and it feels full, not spacious, but full of life. You roll your shoulders, trying to ease the stiffness from the day. Your tunic scratches, and the seams pinch slightly where the wool has shrunk with repeated dampness. Still, it's better than nothing. Far better than nothing. Nearby, your uncle starts telling a story. Something about a man who froze in the forest and was found by wild dogs, but instead of tearing him apart, the dogs slept beside him, keeping him alive. It's clearly nonsense, but everyone listens. Even the baby, who blinks once before falling back asleep. You smile despite yourself. In stories, even frost can be tamed. There's an old saying your mother mutters as she mends a sleeve. Winter either teaches you patience or takes you apart. She doesn't say it with fear, just weariness. You think of all the little tricks that help you survive it: the moss-stuffed shoes, the double socks, the hot stones, the layers of linen worn under wool to keep the itch off your skin. These things aren't luxuries. They're learned, passed down, as essential as knowing when to plant barley or which mushrooms not to eat. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants truly suffered constantly in winter, or whether they adapted better than we assume. Some claim people hibernated in a sense, less, sleeping more, conserving energy. Others believe winter was just a slower kind of misery, full of waiting and wood smoke and numb toes. You can't say for sure, but you know this. The season changes you. It teaches you how long you can go without complaining. You tend the fire again. It's a ritual, really. Stir, stack, feed. The flames respond like a small beast, tame but unpredictable. You love the moment when it flares bright just enough to light up everyone's faces. For a second, you see the whole room, your family, your neighbors, the stranger who might leave tomorrow. All together, all surviving. For now, that's someone knocks at the door. Not a polite tap, a pounding, urgent thud. Everyone freezes. You feel your heart kick your ribs once. Then again, no one moves at first. Then your father slowly gets up, grabs the iron poker, and motions for silence. He eases the door open just a crack. Outside, it's a woman, thin, hooded, holding a bundled child in her arms. Her cheeks are raw from wind, her voice barely above the breeze. Please, just for the night. No one speaks. not for a heartbeat. Then your mother is already at the door, ushering her in. No questions, no judgment. You make space by the fire, offer what's left of the broth, hand her your own wool cloak. She doesn't say much, just clutches the child closer and nods in thanks. The baby looks half frozen. You can see the mother's fingers are blue. Take the cradle, someone says. Put the warm stones near his feet. The woman hesitates, then obeys. This is the rule you were raised with. Warmth is shared, or not at all. Fire hoarded is fire wasted. Beds, food, even stories, they're communal by necessity. Not because it's nice, because it's the only way you make it to spring. As the room quiets again, the traveler begins to hum an unfamiliar song, something mournful and slow. The tune snakes its way through the smoky air like a ghost. You don't know the words, but you feel them settle behind your ribs. You lean back against the wall, fingers laced over your stomach, and close your eyes for a moment. Not sleeping yet, just sinking. A rat scuttles across the rafters. Someone coughs. Someone laughs. The baby in the cradle sighs in his sleep. And through it all, the cold presses at the walls like a beast too large to come inside. For now, you think about the morning, the chores, the frozen bucket, the crust of bread, the ache that never really leaves your shoulders. But those things feel distant, like a dream you've already half forgotten. What you feel now is the heat of the fire on your toes, the scratch of your sister's blanket against your arm, the weight of exhaustion pulling your limbs down, down, down. And somewhere in the quiet, that old refrain rises again in your mind. You probably won't survive this. But it no longer sounds cruel, just honest. You probably won't survive this, not forever, not every winter, but tonight, you will, and tomorrow, you'll work again. You don't remember falling asleep. You just know that at some point, the fire died down to coals, the room became still, and the world outside your eyes blurred into blackness. Someone shifts beside you, and a knee jabs into your ribs. You grunt, half asleep, and adjust your position. The woven mat beneath you feels thinner than ever. Your shoulder digs into the packed earth floor. You're both cold and hot sweaty where you've been tucked in with others, chilled where your back is exposed to the air. But you don't complain. Not because you're noble or patient, but because there's no one to complain to. Everyone's in the same condition. In the deepest hours of the night, you stir again. Your mouth is dry, your back aches, and your dreams have become strange and jumbled, full of livestock in church robes and your mother baking bread out of snow. You roll to your other side and mutter something that doesn't make sense. A chicken clucks sleepily from its perch in the corner. This is your midnight. There's no clock to tell you the time. Of course, no glowing digits on a bedside table. You know it's late because the coals are mostly black. The air is the coldest it's been all night, and outside the window, the sky is darker than ink. Even the dogs aren't barking anymore. Someone rises from the straw pile, padding quietly across the floor, maybe a chamber pot trip, maybe tending to a child. You hear the rustle of cloth, the faint sound of breathing, and a hand blindly groping for the door latch. The outside wind howls in like an angry ghost the moment it's opened. Then it's shut again, the cold chased away once more, and slowly, you drift back down. Some scholars argue that medieval people didn't sleep in one solid block, like we do now. Instead, they might have had first sleep and second sleep, a wakeful period in between, used for talking, praying, stoking the fire, or even sneaking off to meet someone in secret. Whether or not that's true for everyone, it certainly explains why you don't feel alarmed at waking in the middle of the night. It just feels normal. Eventually, the cold wakes you for good. Not entirely, but enough to make you curl tighter, dragging the corner of a blanket over your ears. Your feet are numb. Someone's breath steams in front of your face. A few beds over, someone has started snoring like a rusted bellows. You consider throwing something at them, but decide against it. There's a weird comfort in it, the snore says. They're alive, still here, still making it through the dark, just like you. When dawn finally touches the cloth-covered window, it arrives like a whisper. Not a burst of sunlight, but a slow lightening of the gray. The rooster outside crows once, then, a moment later, again, as if reminding you it wasn't a mistake. You hear someone yawn, another coughs, and then the real rustling begins. Blankets shift, bodies stretch, feet hit the floor with reluctant thuds. It's like a wave, this return to wakefulness. You ride it, groaning, joints stiff. Your tunic smells like smoke and skin and sleep. but it's warm, and it's yours. The baby starts crying. Someone drops a ladle. A chicken clucks indignantly after being stepped on. Morning has officially begun. You trudge toward the basin. The water's icy, your breath fogs the air, and your reflection in the tin dish is not particularly comforting. But you splash your face anyway, rubbing sleep from your eyes. You feel slightly more human now. Slightly. Someone passes you a scrap of rye bread. It's hard, and you chew slowly, softening it with a bit of broth. Another day's first meal, meager, but dependable. You pull on your outer cloak, then grab the bucket. It's your turn to fetch water. As you step outside, the frost crunches underfoot. The village is already alive, neighbors at their doors, fires being rekindled, geese honking in the distance. The sky is clear, crisp, and pale. You inhale, and your lungs sting in that strangely refreshing way cold air has. It's hard not to notice how beautiful it all is in its own harsh way. People nod to you as you pass, offering sleepy greetings. A few are already working, patching thatched roofs or shoveling muck from stalls. You reach the well, and your fingers burn as they grip the rope. This too is winter, and it will pass. You think back over the long night, its aches, its comfort, its rituals, all the small choices that let your family see another morning. A fire tended, a bed shared, a song hummed by a stranger. None of it heroic, all of it necessary. That's what survival looks like here. Quiet, shared, repeated. The rope creaks, the bucket sinks, and your breath clouds the air. You pull, slowly, steadily. It's heavy, everything is, but you don't let go. Because in this world, letting go is the only thing that truly beats you. You carry the full bucket back toward the house, shoulders already sore. Inside, someone has relit the fire. A child is laughing. The smell of warm milk is drifting into the morning. The cold hasn't gone, but you've met it once again, and you're still here.